Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of the European Conservatives podcast, Brussels and Beyond, a podcast designed to keep you in the loop about the political wheelings and dealings that are happening here in Brussels and in the capitals of Europe. My name is Zoltán Kottás. The big news of the week was that the European Parliament adopted the finalised version of the so-called Migration and Asylum Pact, which has been in the works for many years and which would fundamentally alter the way migration is handled within the European Union. One of the most controversial points of the pact is the mandatory solidarity mechanism, which would force member states to accommodate migrants or pay a hefty fine, €20,000 per migrant, if they refuse to do so. Conservative and right-wing parties warned that the pact does not solve the migration crisis, it only aims to manage, not stop, migration flows to Europe. The new rules would send yet another signal to both human smugglers and migrants that they are welcome, because the EU would take care of their asylum claims. More than 1.1 million people claimed asylum last year, the highest number since the beginning of the crisis in 2015 and 16. Central European nations like Hungary, Slovakia and Poland will most likely reject the pact when it is voted on by the European Council, but a qualified majority will be enough for the pact to be accepted. Throughout the legislative process, the Hungarian governing party Fidesz has remained resolutely against the pact, referring to it as an attack on national sovereignty. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán described the legislation as another nail in the coffin of the European Union. Poland's new Liberal Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, stated his country would reject the pact due to the fact that his country has already taken in over 2 million Ukrainian refugees. Another controversial piece of legislation passed by the European Parliament this week is the right to abortion being enshrined in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The motion, which was put forward by the left, the Liberals and the Social Democrats, calls for the EU to stop funding pro-life groups, which the text calls anti-choice. Conservative and right-wing parties objected to the text, arguing that the matter is not part of EU jurisdiction, but falls to member states to determine. The amendment defining abortion as a right contradicts the existing Article 2 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which states that everyone has the right to life. However, the European Parliament's decision is non-binding. The motion would still have to go through the Commission and, more importantly, would have to be approved by the government leaders of all 27 member states. Crucially, that approval would have to be unanimous, a highly unlikely scenario since Hungary, Malta and Italy are certain to stick to their pro-life principles. In what has been called a landmark verdict, the European Court of Human Rights announced this week that Switzerland has violated the human rights of 4 elderly Swiss women by not sufficiently living up to its climate obligations. The court claims that climate change had an adverse effect on the women's human rights, specifically due to their inability to handle hot weather because of their advanced age. The ruling specifically mentions Switzerland's supposed failure to phase out fossil fuels and embrace net zero policies. While applicable only to Switzerland, the verdict could have major ramifications for European energy policy in the 46 member states of the Council of Europe, to which the European Court of Human Rights belongs. The court's decision has led to renewed talk of whether the United Kingdom should still be a signatory to the European Convention of Human Rights. Britain's Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho, has warned that the European Court of Human Rights is taking over decisions on the climate that ought to be made at home. Coutinho said that elected politicians who, in the case of the UK Conservatives, are just as committed to net zero as the judges in Strasbourg, are best placed to make those decisions, not the European Court. The court was also responsible for stopping the UK from sending illegal migrants to Rwanda. The first flight to Rwanda was cancelled almost 2 years ago following a late intervention from the European Court of Human Rights, and not a single migrant has been deported since. The government has made it clear that it has no interest in taking the country out of the convention, even though polling suggests that half of Conservative voters want Britain to leave. Former UKIP and Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage has called for a referendum on the issue. Violent crime climbed to its highest level since 2009 in Germany last year, according to a newly released annual crime report. As has been witnessed in past years, foreigners accounted for a vastly disproportionate percentage, 41% of all criminal suspects. The number was 37% in 2022 and 34% the year before. On the other hand, the overwhelming majority of victims, 75%, were German citizens. In response to the alarming figures, opposition parties issued sharp criticism of the left Liberal coalition's pro-migration policies and called for a drastic shift in policy. The right-wing AfD party demanded a radical turnaround in migration and said that the Federal Interior Ministry has lost control of internal security. The centre-right CDU party called for limits on immigration, increased border controls, fewer social benefits for asylum seekers, restriction of residents' rights, and more resources for the police. Violent criminal incidents, those resulting in serious injuries, robberies, and various sexual crimes, went up by 8.6%, with authorities registering 214,000 total cases in 2023. The number of cases involving dangerous and grievous bodily harm ballooned to more than 154,000, 6.8% more than last year, and a record high. The situation isn't much better in France. The last few weeks of Ramadan have been accompanied in France by an upsurge in violence and intimidation. Its targets are people accused by members of the Muslim community of not respecting the principles of the Quran. In Bordeaux, a man accused of drinking in defiance of Islamic rules was attacked and killed with a knife. In Montpellier, a 14-year-old schoolgirl was taken to hospital in a coma after being beaten up by classmates. According to her mother, the girl was called a whore and an unbeliever because she dressed in European style and was ordered to put on a veil. Jordan Bardella of the right-wing National Rally denounced individuals who want the application of Sharia law. Two vital regional elections are set to take place in Spain in the coming weeks. First off, voters will head to the polling stations in the Basque country next Sunday, where EH Bildu, a separatist pro-independence party, could come first. In 1 month's time, Catalonia will also hold elections, and pro-independence former president of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, will return to run in the elections after years of exile in Brussels. Charges of rebellion, sedition, and misuse of public funds were brought against Puigdemont after he declared the independence of Catalonia in 2017, but the socialist government in Madrid has given him and his colleagues amnesty, meaning Puigdemont can return to Spain. To explain the significance of these elections, I have here with me Spanish journalist Javier Villamor. Javier, let's start with the Catalan elections. What will happen if separatist parties win? Will we see another breakaway attempt by Puigdemont and his allies?
Hello, Zoltan. Thank you for the invitation. That's a good question and a tricky question. I think it's a never-ending question because when elections come, the separatist parties start to promise the same things that have been promising for the last, let's say, 100 years, more or less. And but the thing is that little by little, they have been reaching the objectives they settled down when Spain lost the empire in 1898. The thing is that it's quite strange what you see in the Catalan region, also in Basque region, because you have a mix of conservative parties and extreme left parties working together for the separation of that region from the state. What is going to happen? It probably won't happen anything. The bad thing of the amnesty law is that it's not only an amnesty for the perpetrators, but that the Pedro Sánchez government has erased the crimes. It's like the damnatio memori from the Roman Empire. It's not that they are going out of jail, that they won't find any problem to come back, but at the end of the day is that they erased everything. So the last 10 years in Spain won't exist anymore.
So it's like the Catalan politicians have done nothing wrong.
Exactly. Nothing wrong because what they have done don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem.
Doesn't exist.
Exactly. And not only is a political advantage for them, but also it's economic one because let's say there's a smoke grenade that they have thrown. So you only talk about the political issues, but not the economical issues. What they have asked is that the state has to take care of the 20 billion debt of Catalonia. So the rest of Spain will pay for the debt of Catalan region.
This is also part of the amnesty?
That's right. That's probably the biggest part of the amnesty that the media close to the government hasn't talked about. But always there's the economic side of the political issues. They push on the political way to have economic advantages all the time. That's every time in the elections, and all the time that's a political normal day in Spain.
And does Carles Puigdemont's return to Catalonia and that the fact that he's running in the Catalan elections,
yes,
does that have any significance in terms of the Catalan politics?
It has, because Junts per Catalunya, which is the Puigdemont party, is a classical bourgeois party, high elite, conservative elite, let's say. And then you have ERC, Esquerra Republicana Catalunya, which is the extreme left, with Pere Aragonès right now in the government. And they fight each other. It's like, for example, in the Basque country, you have the PNB, the National Basque Party, and then Bildu, which are the most close to separatist pro-terrorist group. But at the end of the day, they have the same objectives. And the big fight between those parties in Catalan region is Puigdemont and Oriol Junqueras. Oriol Junqueras, at the time in 2017, when the coup d'etat happened, it was the guy that went to jail. Meanwhile, Puigdemont escaped and has been living in Belgium for these years. He said recently that if he's not going to be the next president of Catalonia, he will leave politics. Let's see what happens. So that's a promise I think that he will not fulfill because he leaves from politics and he needs the money.
So you mentioned that these two main separatist parties in Catalonia, they don't get along very well.
Not that much.
But in terms of wanting independence, would they work together to try and achieve something?
Exactly. They have been trying for, let's say, since the democracy for 40 years. And it's like in the national politics, you have the Socialist and the Popular Party. More or less, they give them they fight between each other. But at the end of the day, they both more or less the same. They have the same issue here in European elections. PP and Socialist Party, both more or less the same for the 80% of the votes. So more or less is the same in Spain. The thing is that the problem, let's say, is that how they reach. There's the radical side, which is the ERC, and they're not that so radical, but more trying to be more political, more normal way, more constitutional way, which is the Junts party. But the problem is that they have radicalized so much that they have to take steps forward all the time. They pass the turning point. So there is no turning point anymore because you have to offer something to your electorate. And what you offer is all the time referendum, independence, but it never came. But actually now, Pere Aragonès said that after the amnesty law, the next step will be the referendum. Let's see how it happens. The problem now is that we have socialist government also in Spain. So I think we are closer to see probably an official referendum about the independence of Catalonia, which is some of us in Spain, we are not against. It is allowed by constitution, but to have in a national referendum. What they want to do is only to have a regional referendum, which is not only legal, but also, let's say, it's not fair.
Yeah, I think for the regional government to have a referendum, it would have to have the approval of the Madrid government, right?
Exactly.
For it to be legal.
Exactly.
Yes.
And some of us, in my case, I'm conservative, I'm right-wing, let's say, I'm against independence, but I would like to vote. But being clear, like saying, look, this is the vote, this is the referendum. If the no wins, you cannot be anymore in politics. That independent parties should be erased and start to have a new normal life as a community. I think that most of the people deserves and wants in Spain.
And what's the situation with this deal which was made by Pedro Sanchez, the socialist prime minister in Madrid, and the Catalan separatists, which allowed for Carles Puigdemont to return to Catalonia, and which basically erased the crimes, as you mentioned. How do people in Spain view this deal?
Let's say we are divided. Of course, the people that are supports the government, all the parties around the government, they are in favor. But what we see is that somehow they have crossed the red line, and some people from the left start to realize that they have been dreaming a bad dream. In fact, 3 weeks ago, a new party came up from the left, which is called Spanish Left, Izquierda Española, which is let's say, the old left that is, of course, supporting this class fight, typical Marxist idea, but in a classical way. So they're against the woke ideas, they're against gender, they're against massive immigration, they're against this climate change craziness. And the last polls, they give quite a good result. Maybe not, of course, like 3 or 4 seats, but maybe 1, 2, which is kind of a big difference in Spain if we take a look at what has been happening for the last 20, 30 years. So we people from the right, let's say, we expect that left to grow in the next elections.
And that would be bad for the
Yes.
Sanchez government.
Yes, we are seeing that also across Europe. The left has lost the north. They support crazy things, and some people are criticizing those groups, like, you are losing the north, you are making us losing the north, and our votes will break. And we don't want the right to win. That's fair. But we have to go back to the previous steps. Right? And I think Spain, especially Spain, needs a normal, if we can say normal left, because in the last 40 years, we can go also to the beginning of the 20th century. In the last, let's say, 100 years, we have had and we have a left that is against all that Spain represents, all the nation identity, all the regional identities. They are trying to destroy the nation to build a new one. And that's when all these separatist groups came up together.
And just one more question about the Basque elections, which are next Sunday. Also, there is a separatist party which seems to be the first in the opinion polls, Bildu. What's the situation there? And what is this Bildu? It's, as far as I know, it's somehow closely connected to the ETA, a terrorist group.
Indeed. ETA at the time had two bodies, 2 parts, the political brand and the army brand. Kind of the IRA in Ireland, which big difference about the purposes, but more or less the same. And the political brand has been changing the names almost in every elections, because at that time also they were persecuted by the law because they were openly pro-terrorist. And now everything has changed, especially since 2004, when the socialist former president Rodríguez Zapatero came to power, because they created a roadmap between the socialists and the separatists all around Spain to take over the power and never let it go. More or less what happens now in Spanish America, Latin America, with all these groups from the left. So they packed. The roadmap is not public. We don't know what they have packed at that time, but it's official. And we can now see the results. The results is that the socialist government is not supporting the state anymore. They are always supporting all those groups against the state. And also we can see the narrative. Until quite recently, all the media were attacking all these groups because they were openly pro-terrorist. But now they are freedom fighters, right? They are supporting the human rights and all the stuff. So they have cleaned their image, and now they are so-called Democrats. And now we are supposed to be the fascists and the terrorists. So you can see how everything has turned over completely in only 10 years. And it's a big risk because not only Bildu is, let's say, pro-terrorist, they haven't condemned all the terrorist attacks, but because we can see that if this keep on this way for the next 10 to 20 years, probably Spain will officially become a federal country. I know that some people don't see this as a problem, but for Spain is. Since the actual constitution of 1978, we have 18 governments. We have the central government and then 17 regional governments. And that's a waste of money, that's a waste of time, and that's a waste of human resources. And if you want to fight and to get the fight, and nowadays, you have to be strong and coming together with one identity. I know Spain has a lot of identities, we do respect that, but we cannot fight each other all the time if you want to do something in this world. And some people compare this to the German regions, the Länder, but it's not the same. The actual Spanish communities, regions, have more independence than all the regions in Europe come together. And there's also a big problem. We can see now how Brussels is supporting this idea of Europe of the regions. So they are pushing the regions to have more political identity and political strength in order to erase the national sovereignty. So we will have in the future Brussels and regions. We have the Parliament of the regions here in Brussels. And I was surprised last year, I think it was October, November, I went to cover the Employment Forum of the European Union. And they talked about this, how they have to promote the regions and how they have to promote Brussels, but no one talk about nations. And I guess that's the direction that Brussels want us together to be there. Spain is we can say that's kind of a political laboratory. If in Spain works all this, it will come to your nations in the future for sure.
Javier, thank you very much for this insightful interview.
Thanks for the invitation.
Two other significant elections were held last weekend in Europe. Former Prime Minister Peter Pellegrini won the second round in Slovakia's presidential election last Saturday. Pellegrini gained 53%, while his rival, former Foreign Minister Ivan Korčok, got 47%. Pellegrini is an ally of sovereigntist nationalist Prime Minister Robert Fico, who came back into power in October and has angered both his EU and NATO allies for his nationalist stance. He has criticized pro-migration policies, EU federalization attempts, transgenderism, woke culture, sanctions against Russia, and has called for peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. His rhetoric has led to direct threats by EU institutions who have warned that EU funds could be withheld from Slovakia. Fico alluded to these threats by saying Slovakia could face further punishments for voting in Peter Pellegrini instead of Ivan Korčok. After his election victory, Peter Pellegrini said he would do everything for Slovakia to forever remain on the side of peace and not the side of war, but he emphasized that his country would remain a strong member of the EU and NATO. In Poland, the Conservative Law and Justice Party, who were ousted from power in last year's parliamentary elections, won Polish local elections last Sunday, gaining 34% of the votes. Jarosław Kaczyński, leader of the Law and Justice Party, called the victory an encouraging win and said Poland must be a country ruled by Polish patriots and cannot go down the path that Donald Tusk is pushing it at the moment. Tusk, who was elected as Prime Minister last year, has been busy harassing his political opponents. The government has dismissed the top executives of the public service broadcaster, jailed 2 MPs from the Law and Justice Party, raided the home of the former Justice Minister, replaced the country's prosecutors, and is set to drag the president of the central bank before a special tribunal. Law and Justice sees the actions of the government as pure political revenge, but EU institutions, which regularly lambasted the previous Conservative government for so-called rule of law violations, are now not voicing any concerns. In an interview for the European Conservative, Ryszard Czarnecki, a member of the European Parliament for the Law and Justice Party, said of the situation in Poland that double standards are emblematic of the EU. There is no respect or tolerance for the enemies of Brussels, but it turns a blind eye to the intolerance and lack of freedom exercised by its allies. As Ryszard Czarnecki said, and I quote, It is an example of the hypocrisy of Brussels. It is not Ursula von der Leyen who governs the EU, but hypocrisy. With regards to the European Parliament elections to be held in less than 2 months' time, Ryszard Czarnecki believes the elections are extremely important because there is great opportunity to turn the EU to the right. He said, and I quote, "I'm sure that the new European Parliament will be more conservative, more open to traditional values, more realistic about migration policy, and more skeptical about the Green Pact and the insane climate policy. We have a chance to create a large political group, and we can expect about 200 MEPs from Euro-realist and Eurosceptic parties. This is not enough to reach a majority, but it is enough to create a minority with the ability to block important decisions, for examples on issues such as migration or the Green Pact." To read the full interview, click on our website. And that concludes this episode of Brussels and Beyond. Don't forget to read our magazine, check out our website, subscribe to our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube channels, and watch our monthly TV show, Inside Brussels. Hope you tune in again next week. Have a very good week. Bye bye.